Hi there, Mike Perez with Mastering the Young Band. The transition for your beginners from going from playing without any music to reading music has to be done very thoughtfully, slowly, and carefully. In my Essential Foundations warm-up book that I sell on my website, MikePerezBand.com, there are 3 really important pages at the beginning of this method that I think your students need to learn and play really well, achieve proficiency, before you dive into your band book. I always recommend that people still use a band book with their beginning band students, but what I recommend you do is use my Essential Foundations pages first. The first thing I want to point out to you is the first 5 notes page. This is page 1 right out of my warm-ups, and basically what it is you can see here, I know this is the light's kind of getting it a little bit. It's the first 5 notes, concert B flat to concert F, and it starts in whole notes. What I do, so my students already know their first 5 notes. They've already achieved proficiency understanding what the fingerings are. They know the note names for them, brass, they know the positions. So when I introduce this first 5 notes, we've already actually played it. So what's neat is the way I teach my beginners, we actually play this kind of an exercise before they even read the music. So then when they open it for the first time, they go, we've already played this. This is already what we're doing. And then it's like, exactly. Now here's what it looks like. Here's what we have been playing for the past few weeks. So you can see here, it's just simple whole notes for the first 5 notes. And that just gets them following their music and reading. So I usually do have them start off counting it, going 1-2-3-4, touch. 1-2-, and so they count it. The touch, by the way, is touching the rest, getting them used to their sound, goes all the way to count 1. We say touching the rest in my program. Step 2 is to daw it. So we go da, touch. Da, they say the word da. I prefer the word da because it lightens up the tongue and doesn't get everybody articulating too hard at first. Then we say the note names. So for the C instruments, they'll go F, touch, F, touch. And then we'll obviously go through the whole line that way. Then the next step with brass players, I have them say their position. So if it's a concert F, it's like the trumpets and horns G, they'll go first, touch. So they'll say the position, chant it as they're following their music. What's good about my warm-ups too is it has all the measure numbers in there. So that way I can call out measure numbers for those students that are having trouble tracking their music, for those beginners that struggle with that. Then the next step is I have them air and finger. So they'll have their instruments, flutes I have play off onto their head joint and actually go on their head joints. Everybody else blows air into their instruments while they do the position. So I'll play the line straight through. I might do it twice. They go, okay, your turn. And then they play. And of course, they already know how to play. So they sound pretty darn good that first time. And then we do the same process through all the 5 notes. This next line is perhaps the most important line for your beginners in their transition to reading music, understanding fingerings, and understanding note names. As you can see here, they go from concert F to E flat to D, D to C, C to B flat. So they work on the transitions between notes. What you're going to find with beginners is just playing one note, piece of cake. It's when transitioning notes, that's usually the step that kills off about half of your band at the beginning, especially your flute players. Flute players, those fingerings are just hard. So we spend a lot of time on this line here. It's line 6 on the first 5 notes. We do the same thing. We'll count it, we'll daw it, we'll spend a lot of time note naming. F, E flat, touch. Brass will say their positions. First, third, touch, third, fourth, touch. And we'll go through it that way. Then we'll daw it, we'll air and finger, and then we do play it. Now here's a tip, especially for your flute players that are struggling with this. We might play that first measure 4 times. Da, da, da. They play it back. Do that 4 times. Then we might do 4 times the next measure, 4 times the next measure, 4 times with the next. Instruments like clarinet, that's usually not as hard. Trombones even usually do pretty well as tubas going note to note. But spending a lot of time making sure your students achieve proficiency on this line is going to pay dividends for the rest of the year. My first assessment I do with beginners is a rhythm counting test to make sure they understand how to stay with the time, tempo, and we do one line of rhythm counting that's 4 measures long. Their second assessment in beginning band is line 6 from the first 5 notes. It tells me they understand tempo. It tells me they understand their first 5 notes. They understand how their positions work and how to read their music. It tells me so much. That is the most important test. That first 8 weeks of beginning band is that number 6 right there. Now, you heard me mention the first 3 pages. So we work on the first 5 notes. Then the next step for my beginners, so I teach articulation starting at about the 4th to 5th week of beginning band. Once the students have a proficient embouchure, they consistently demonstrate a good embouchure. They know the fingerings of the first 5 notes. They can play their first 5 notes pretty consistently. Then that's when I introduced articulation. This first warm-up, what you'll see here, this is a great way of teaching articulation to your students because they get a lot of repetition. Flutes do a lot of head joints, so there's whole notes, half notes, quarter, quarter, half, and then quarter notes. Brass players, we learn articulation on the tube. And by the way, I do have videos on how I teach articulation in my YouTube channel. You'll want to check those out. But this first warm-up, we go from concert F articulating, then we go to low concert B flat articulating, and then this page, it's not quite as important for woodwinds, this page, maybe flutes it is, but your brass, this is where they really translate their sirens into their music. So instead of going dee, now they actually start playing that lip slur, da, ta. Now, I don't teach it as a slur at first, I do have them tongue. But this page right here, this is what really gets your students learning articulation and playing a lot of articulation over and over and over. Then, the next step, even though this is page 2, so we went from page 1 to page 3, but back to page 2, the first 5 notes set 2. Now they apply what they've learned about the first 5 notes, what they've learned about articulation, and then they put it together. So you can see here, concert F, half notes, quarter, quarter, half, then quarter notes. Line 2, concert E flat, same thing. That is my favorite pattern for beginners, is to go through that rhythmic sequence on every note that they learn to get comfortable with it and to articulate it right away. Then over here, get them going on some technique a little bit early. F, F, E flat, touch. E flat, D, D, touch. It goes to their first 5 notes, articulating quarter notes. Then it goes back up, so it goes up from the B flat to the F. Then here, F, E flat, touch. E flat, D, touch, and then it keeps going down. Then it goes back up, B flat, C, touch. Then the last line, they go F to E flat, then F to D, then F to C, F to B flat, and then up, B flat, C, B flat, D. By the time your beginners can play this page, the first 5 notes set 2, the minute you open up that method book, you can go right to Hot Cross Buns, you can go to Mary Had a Little Lamb, whatever your first tunes are, your first 5-note tunes or even 3-note tunes in your book, and your kids can just play them. And they're so excited because you spend all of this time building up all these skills and they're so excited to get to play some tunes. You hand out that book, they have a great embouchure, they understand their first 5 notes, they understand how to articulate, they understand how to read music, and so they can just open that book, and it's amazing. They can play like their first, probably about 3 to 4 pages of their beginning band book within a few weeks because of the transition from learning their instrument without music to the first 5 notes, set 1 and 2, and this first warm-up. I highly, highly recommend that is your scope and sequence for your beginners. You'll just be so pleased with the progress they make once they do finally open up that book if you start with those 3 pages. Again, MikePerezBand.com is where my Essential Foundations is located. And you can, of course, check out my YouTube channel for articulation and even how to start beginners, how I teach them at my school. Take care.